And a very pleasant good morning to you. I'm Gary Sutton. And Thursday morning, also known as, Friday Eve morn. How's that? And, of course, tomorrow being the Easter weekend, for those of you that are commemorating that, and Good Friday and Easter, of course, coming up on Sunday. I am Gary Sutton, and welcome to the Thursday morning edition of the Gary Sutton Show. Lots to cover today. We're going to be all over the lot, so you do not want to miss a minute of the show, plus an entire hour at the end for your calls to come in here at 1-800-357-0910. We start the day with Chris Markowski, the Watchdog on Wall Street, here on the Gary Sutton Show.
We got to make sure that we have an economy that's not just growing from the top down, because it doesn't really grow when it's just from the top down. We've got to have an economy where it grows from the middle class up and from the bottom up.
That was the president yesterday at Allegheny College here in Pennsylvania making some remarks. And Chris is with us this morning. Chris, good morning to you. How are you doing?
Good morning. How are you?
Good. You heard that quote yesterday. I used to study economics, but I'm not sure I learned the right thing. I'm trying to figure out what the president keeps on meaning when he says that. I understand a little bit of what he's really saying without saying it, but does it make sense when you hear that? We can't really build the economy from the top down. We got to build it from the bottom up and the middle out?
Well, I mean, I understand in the sense that, a lot of small business owners are, they're kind of in difficult times right now. I mean, you take a look at some of the statistics and some of the numbers, going back as far as the government has taken them. You go back to the 1970s in regards to net job growth. I discussed this last week on my program. Most of the jobs created, actually all the net jobs created, were done in small businesses. And that's what half of new businesses actually failing over that period of time. So it shows you where most of the job creation comes from here in this country. It's coming from small businesses. With that being said, you take a look at the Federal Registry for 2013, its greatest increase ever, new rules. You take a look at Obamacare. You take a look at all these little mines that the government is placing in front of people that want to grow, that want to expand the middle class, that are part of the middle class, and it goes after them. It is difficult for people that are in that area, small people that are looking to start businesses. It is very difficult for them. I don't think the government's doing much of anything to help them out at this point in time. You just take a look at the percentage of taxes. The top 1% are paying a ton. We know that already. I don't know what his plans are for growing that middle class and growing that area, but what he's been doing certainly isn't helping.
It's interesting, kind of adding on the back of that, you talk about growing from the middle out or the bottom up, and you said about small business creating a lot of jobs, and I think that's a great point. But I was just reading an editorial this morning in the Wall Street Journal where they said that he has no peer when it comes to regulations. They had Washington set a new record in 2013 by issuing final rules, consuming 26,417 pages in the Federal Register, and we had something like 3,659 final rules. Nobody has ever had that many regulations on record as any president of the United States.
No, that's just part of it. I mean, it doesn't even include, we just got past tax day. It doesn't include the taxes. Doesn't include Obamacare. It's very, very difficult time right now, and people aren't willing to go out there and take the risks that they had in the past. And those jobs, those middle class jobs, they start out middle class and they start going. And the people who start businesses, they've been few and far between throughout this entire supposed recovery that we're having. Yeah, I mean, corporate America, big businesses, they're able to make it. They've already globalized themselves. They can conduct business all over the globe. I think the latest numbers I saw that over $2 trillion in corporate profits are being held offshore at this point in time. They're making a fortune. And it's fine. I don't have any problem with people making money and doing well. But, again, we need to see job growth. You want to see growth in the middle class, you've got to certainly make it easier on them.
But if the president wants to do that, then, as you said, then you've got to cut down the regulations. Somehow we have to get back to trusting the people in this country to do business in the way that they've always done it. And it seems to me the less regulation, the better off we're going to be. I realize there are people that cheat, and I realize that capitalism is based as a cornerstone on ethics, and yet at the same time, to over-regulate us and bear down, especially guys like you, you that have a small business that you're working on there, and you want to do those things, and then the president comes out and says, well, you're going to pay more minimum wage now. You should be doing that. And, you have to make sure you pay attention to our regulations. So it's going to take you all kinds of time during your day and money. That seems to be totally at odds with what he's trying to say yesterday.
Well, another problem that people fail to realize in regards to this is the fact that all these regulations and all this stuff, it entrenches power with already big business. Big business has no trouble dealing with more regulation. They have the people that can handle it. It's like the tax code. When General Electric does their taxes and they print it out and it's 19 feet high and they don't pay a dime, that's because they can. And they have the armies of accountants and attorneys that can make that happen. Or Dodd-Frank and what it's doing to community banks all around the country that can't, handle the regulations anymore. They just close up shop or sell themselves to one of the big banks. And, it's like Pac-Man. Everybody's getting gobbled up by somebody bigger because it's too difficult to be a startup in many parts of this country.
I read a really interesting piece this morning in Bloomberg, and it said, spare a thought for the millionaires this week. The bill from last year's tax increases has come due. The rich aren't poor, of course, whatever their tax burden. An adjusted gross income of $389,000 puts you in the top 1% of earners in 2011, according to the latest IRS data. But put aside the tone-deaf rich and their caricatures in pop culture and hold the class warfare, and they said a hypothetical couple has $2 million in its savings goal to hit just to meet expenses it would most or entirely cover in other developed countries. In other words, they're saying the rich is now being taxed too much. Your thoughts about that?
Well, I mean, as a percentage of the entire bill here in the country, that's most certainly the case.
Yeah.
You take a look at who's paying the bill. And there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. It's not just top 1%. You go to the top 10%. It's almost the whole thing.
Yeah.
You go to the top 20%. It is the whole thing. Really, if you really want to look at it statistically. So yeah, you got a large swath of the population is paying for everybody. It's not supposed to work that way. I mean, I understand having a progressive income tax. I don't really care for it. I much would rather have a point of sale type of a levy, where kind of like the fair tax, where you're paying when you purchase something.
Right.
It is become really, really skewed at this point in time at who's paying.
I was reading, just looking at the Constitution this morning, Article 1, Section 8. Like I just happened to pick it up, but no, I was actually doing it because getting ready for this. But it says, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense, general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. When did that horse leave the corral?
Yeah, it's most certainly not uniform. That's why you have a tax code that's 70,000 pages plus long. That in of itself is part of the problem. You talk about the registry with regulations. You can talk about the tax code, and you say to yourself, this is something that's too complex. I mean, if you go to IKEA and you want to have a bookshelf and the instruction manual was 50 pages long, you're probably not going to pick that piece of junk up at IKEA. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
it's just like this is crazy. Simplicity is important in everything that we do. Laws should be simple. Rules should be simple. Our tax code should be simple. And I mentioned the fact that when Steve Jobs was asked, talk about a company that has been great at simplifying the use of electronic devices and ease of use with software programs, Apple is a good one. But Steve Jobs was asked back in the 1980s about the latest word processing software that was coming out. Forget who was doing it. You remember those old programs?
Oh yeah.
And the instruction manual was like some 400 pages long. He's like, yeah, that's great. I got to read a novel to write a novel. So this is where we've gotten here in this country. Is we've made it so difficult on people to understand these things and get on. They just choose not to.
Let me make you President Markowski for a moment. And you hear the politicians all talking about, let's simplify the tax code, let's make it easy and so forth. When in reality, I don't think a lot of them really want to do that, because by having it be confusing, they're still making some money off our backs. However, if you were to simplify it down, how simple could you make it from your particular vantage point there, President Markowski?
Oh, you could do a tax code in 2 pages if you wanted to. I mean, it's real. It's not hard to do. I mean, why is it so difficult? Not even. I mean, some of the best pieces of legislation that we have. I think our Constitution's not very long. I've talked about Glass-Steagall, which was the financial regulations law of the land for almost 70 years. That was 30-something pages long. What have we piled on since then? Thousands of pages, and we're still writing them. What worked better? It's not a difficult thing to do. There's just too many. The tax code is just a way that politicians have power, and they can do give-outs, and they can do handouts, and they can do all sorts of stuff to their favored constituents. This is where all the political power comes from, quite frankly, and it's pretty sad.
So when you look at things like Obamacare, and you look at some of the other laws they have out there, like Dodd-Frank and so forth, that are 2,000 pages long, 1,000 pages long, is this basically just an effort by them to complicate the simplicity?
Well, no, we're a nation of lawyers now. I mean, we used to, when we were founded, we were a nation of farmers. And you can say that, Hamilton brought in, we were, nation of people who built things and made things, manufacturers. We're a nation of attorneys now. The more complicated and the more gray areas in laws, the more billable hours that is to attorneys.
We're talking with Chris Markowski, the Watchdog on Wall Street, here on Thursday morning on the Gary Sutton Show. I was reading something a little bit earlier this morning, and it was talking about the where was it here? I just lost it for a second. Anyway, food prices are going to be pinching Americans, and right now we're seeing food prices like meat prices going through the roof. How far do we go with this one right now in terms of inflation starting to rise?
Well, that was interesting because Janet Yellen was talking about that and, talking about her, Taylor rule that she's going to follow in regards to deficit spending, and if deficit spending causes inflation, well, then she's going to raise rates, and it's going to rein it in and force politicians to, to not do deficit spending. And, I don't understand where she's getting the idea at this point in time, because they're talking about inflation that there isn't any. To me, I take a look at what the grocery bill is, and that's one of the best places to look to see if there's inflation out there. What are you paying for food at this point in time? And, across the board, I mean, beef prices hit a record high like last week, and now we've got all other food, pork and shrimp and other everything is going through the roof. Everything is going through the roof as far as food. And to me, that's one of the most important things that you would account for if it comes to inflation. What's your grocery bill?
One of the things that I saw, you were talking about Janet Yellen and the Fed, and one of the things that Alan Reynolds wrote about this in Investors today, and he said Fed can print money, but it can't print jobs. It seems to me that, again, we hear politicians talk all the times about we've created this amount of jobs, we've created that amount of jobs. But again, we come back to the idea, and I know it's simplistic, and I hate to even throw it at you if it's maybe beneath you, but isn't it the job of our government to create an atmosphere, more or less to get out of the way, to allow jobs to be created? Again, kind of circling back to where we started this whole thing.
Well, yeah, one would think that that's the case, but it's not. I mean, the job of our government at this point in time is nothing but redistributing wealth. That's what they do. They take in, close to $4 trillion, and they disperse it. Certain companies they like, certain people, constituencies they like. It's a big disbursement thing that they've got going on here. It was the numbers I was looking at. I said they got about 83 million Americans plus that are working in the private sector, and there's some 140 million plus people that are getting some sort of government benefit, some sort of subsidy. So it's just one big, we send Washington, D.C. the money, they send it somewhere else, and they take their little cut, their commission there. So it's a big business that they're running in. It's not much different to how Wall Street operates at this point in time. Wall Street used to be in the business of creating and building companies, and they kind of morphed themselves into let's just push paper from one end of the room to the other and collect a fee. Chris,
we're going to take a break. We're going to come right back with you. And when we do, I want to talk about what is the dumbest federal policy ever that affects us? Take your pick. Chris Markowski will answer that question. He's a watchdog on Wall Street when he returns here on the Gary Sutton Show, the Thursday morning edition on News Radio 910 WSBA. Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. I am Gary Sutton. It's a Thursday morning. Chris Markowski is the watchdog on Wall Street. He keeps his eyes peeled there all the time, right, Chris? 24/7, you're looking at Wall Street.
We give it an effort.
I know you do, and you're good at it, too. So the dumbest federal policy that you ever can remember being passed from your particular vantage point?
Oh, wow. Dumb in different sense. People will look at, Obamacare, and you look at how that's failing, and that has a certain level of dumb in the sense that how many people they actually providing health insurance to, and what you did to change the whole thing. But to me, in my business, in my industry, I think it was definitely repealing the Glass-Steagall Act.
Right. For the uninitiated out there,
a lot of people don't understand it, but
yeah.
I mean, I do, and I've seen what's happened since they've done it, and it's completely changed the financial industry, and not for the better.
So for people out there that don't know about Glass-Steagall, just a quick history lesson on that, and why repealing that was so bad.
It separated it kept commercial banks and investment banks. It kind of kept everybody away from one another, allowed them to actually be in the business that they were supposed to be in, and rather than be conflicted. And it allowed for the advent of these financial supermarkets that we have today, and we've had so many problems from the dot-coms and stock analysts putting out buy recommendations on companies that they knew were terrible, the demise of the New York Stock Exchange. It doesn't even exist anymore. No such thing. It's just a movie set. Basically we haven't seen the big banks out there, the investment banks going out there and funding good companies and really looking out for that type of area of business. Nothing has been good for the individual investor since they repealed Glass-Steagall.
Chris, when you look at Obamacare, we have a little bit of the dust kind of trying to settle now. I think it still has some more to settle. There's a lot of things that we don't know yet that are going to happen with that, and one of the things we don't know is how the corporate mandate's going to come down next year and what will happen out of that. In the meantime, where are we right now? You mentioned about Obamacare. Where are we right now? It seems to me we should have said, well, we put a period at the end of that sentence, let's move on. The president would like us to believe that. And yet at the same time, a lot of us don't feel that way yet, do we?
Well, it's difficult to measure something when there's no metric. There's no, they're not showing their work. I mean, they can say anything at this point in time. Nobody is really believing that 7 million plus number that the president had put out there. Nobody's believing a lot of the stuff. I mean, the only metric that I have to really judge Obamacare at this point in time is what my premiums have done, and they've gone straight up.
Something else.
That's the only metric that I have to go on right now.
There it is. And so as those go up, then you make adjustments elsewhere, right?
Oh, absolutely. You have to. You have no choice. And they've gone up a lot. I was happy to see Republicans, and they kind of got some flack for this because they got flack for saying, that they're expanding Obamacare. No, they allowed for health savings accounts to stay around a little bit longer. They were really close to being canceled, the high deductible insurance with health savings accounts. At least I still have them for now. Who knows when they might be canceled, but my premiums have gone through the roof.
Exactly. Hey, one of the things I saw out there as I was looking through things yesterday, small U.S. colleges are really kind of battling a death spiral right now as enrollment drops. We hear about the amounts of money that costs to go to colleges. Small U.S. colleges, in many cases state-run schools, are fairly cheap by comparison, and yet there's a lot of small colleges right now that are suffering here in the country. Again, is that an indication of where we are in the economy right now?
Gee, maybe they should have saved some money along the way, or done something a little bit different. I mean, some of these small colleges charge you $40,000-$50,000 a year, if not more.
Yeah.
It is what it is. I mean, people are starting to wake up. I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to see people finally starting to open up their eyes. I mean, we see it here in the state of Florida. We got kids that are getting into Ivy League schools that are saying, you know what, or Williams or Hamilton and some of these schools that they have in the Northeast that are fantastic schools, but they're saying, you know what, I'm going to University of Florida. It's a lot cheaper,
right?
And I'm going to get a great education there. And they're doing it smart. It's smart. You take a look at the landscape. I said, who in the world wants to graduate from college and $150,000, $200,000? That's
great way to start your work life, right?
It's just one of the dumbest things ever. Let's start life being in so far in debt. I can't start a family. I can't do much of anything. I mean that's nuts.
And basically, we go back to the idea of, okay, do what you do with what you have, right? I mean, there's got to be some kind of realistic live within your means. But again, who can blame somebody on Main Street for looking at, up at the top and say, oh, well, there's no price tag on that. I can go out and do it, and someone's going to forgive that college debt later on, right?
Well, that's part of it too. It's part of the ruse is that like, oh yeah, you can go out and get student loans. I mean, and the fact that banks were giving these student loans because you couldn't default on them was part of why not make the loan? I can't lose a dime on this loan. Who cares? I mean, who's going to loan a kid? That type of money at 18 years old, they've never even had a job. Maybe some of them never even had a job in their life. Here you go. Here's $50,000 a year. Go to school.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole idea in of itself is stupid. If we didn't backstop those loans, the banks wouldn't be making them, and then the cost of colleges would come down. You talk about other government idea, bad government ideas, is the government getting involved and helping out and sending kids to college. If they didn't do that, then the colleges would price themselves according to what people could afford to pay. Novel concept.
And with that, we end the day, Chris. Great stuff, man. We went all over the lot, and I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next Thursday.
You got it. Have a good one.
Take care. Have a great week. Chris Markowski, the Watchdog on Wall Street, with us here on the Gary Sutton Show.